So when defining or redefining your niche on YouTube, it can be a little bit tricky, but it's extremely important. So you need to make sure that you define your audience correctly because you could be targeting the wrong audience from the beginning, which could result in just no engagement or views in general, and just ultimately a failed experience on YouTube. Now, a lot of people will say, build a faceless channel and, go into a niche with all this research, and they'll give you a million reasons why. And sure, that is an option, but going in without a plan is not a great idea. Often it's going to take a lot of attempts to get it right too. I've spent the last 9 years on YouTube, and I'm not going to pretend to know it all about YouTube. There's a lot that I can still learn. So I'm not going to go at this topic with the assumption that I know that all there is to know about this particular topic, about building your niche and redefining your niche. I'm going to approach it more on the side of, yeah, I've been on the platform for a long time, but there's a lot of mistakes that I've made. And honestly, a lot of those can be avoided. One of them being, I didn't define my niche early on. And in fact, I pivoted my content from one niche to the other, and that also hurt my channel. There are ways to be able to do that without destroying or damaging your channel. And we can go over that in another section. But today we're going to talk about defining your niche and even further down the road, redefining your niche, which is extremely important. And I'm going to focus more on redefining your niche because most of us in this group already have a YouTube channel of some kind. And you've probably defined your niche to some degree, maybe even without knowing it if you haven't deliberately put in that work. So the first thing that's extremely important is the rule of failure. And it's not really a rule, but it's just kind of a principle that I like to live by, and something that I have experienced with a lot of people on Twitter. I like to use Twitter a lot to communicate a lot of these ideas, but ultimately this one user posted on Twitter saying that they failed at YouTube and they failed at Instagram or TikTok, and they're trying Twitter and they're still failing. And honestly, and I don't know their particular situation, but a lot of the time it's not going to happen the first time. You're not going to get it right the first time. And that's something that I live by. So, you failed once. That's one way not to do it. You fail again. That's a second way not to do it. You failed a third time. That's just a third way of how not to do it. So ultimately, it's just going to take attempts to figure out what works and what doesn't. And redefining your niche can significantly help with that. So let's go ahead and start with 5 steps, just 5 steps on how to essentially redefine your niche. It's going to take a series of analytical steps, which I'll go through. And this can apply to either unique channels in the market or broadly defined niches in the market. But with more broadly defined niches, it can be a lot trickier to define your niche and to get a successful channel out of it. I have definitely entered into saturated niches, and being in a saturated niche is, at least for a beginner or intermediate, not a great idea. And I've learned that the hard way. Making sure that your content is relevant and engaging and ultimately brings success to your audience is probably one of the biggest goals you can have. So keeping that in mind, let's move further down. Like, why should you do this? If I've already defined my niche, why should I redefine it? Because I've already done that work. Well, there are 3 main steps that I like to stick by when redefining your niche. And the first one is adaptation to change. Your niche can change, just like technology, just like farming practices, just like Twitter, X, it proves my point. Changes happen all the time, and redefining your niche and re-understanding what it is that makes your audience tick is going to be extremely important. It's fast-paced, especially in today's industry. The 21st century is moving faster than any century has ever done. So making sure that you adapt to change is one of the key points. Relevancy is extremely similar to point number 1, but is something that I felt like needed to be separated, because when you ensure that your product or service remains highly relevant, is going to be extremely beneficial. No one wants to download an After Effects pack on how to, make a transition. If they just want to download the pack that does it for you, they're not going to download a tutorial on how to do that. And it's not relevant to most people. They're going to go watch a YouTube video on how to do a transition for their project in Premiere Pro. They're not going to want to download a tutorial or a course on how to do that. So it's not going to be relevant for their situation. Now, making sure the relevancy of your channel or product, that's going to really help define where your niche goes and the success of your business. Redefining your niche also gives you a renewed perspective. Ultimately, a lot of people miss the real juicy parts of defining their niche in the first place. Either they incorrectly define their niche or just miss out on opportunities to refine it further or to understand their audience. So often doing it the first time, you might miss a lot of stuff, and redefining it will give you some renewed perspective. So there's 5 steps to redefining your niche, or at least 5 main steps. There could be a lot more, but I'm just going to go over some of the initial important ones. One of the first ones for me was to first do a self-assessment and to assess the market. It's kind of like a 2-in-1 sucker punch, if you will. So re-identify your strategies and passions. Ultimately, it's not the best idea to go along with your passions on YouTube, because often it's not what the market wants. You have to be careful with choosing your passions as opposed to choosing or finding a pain point for your audience or for a particular fan base. Now, I'm not saying, go and start a YouTube channel on a farming product that the market really wants, but you find absolutely zero interest and enjoyment in. That's not what I'm going to say, even though maybe, it might be an option, but you run the risk of burnout and just losing interest in general. So it can be hard to keep going. It'll almost feel like, one of those 9-to-5 jobs that you just don't want to go to anymore. But at the same time, it's not always going to be your passion or something that you are necessarily good at. And why am I going to say create or redefine your channel based on a niche that you might not necessarily be that good at? Well, you can still create a channel based on the idea that I'm still learning and I'm going to present to you what I have learned in this topic. So for example, you've seen videos on YouTube about how I learned to become a professional Valorant player, a video game. And they will often document the process going through that. And I think that's also a great way to approach the topic if you don't know much about it. Ultimately, you need to make sure that there's a couple options. Enjoy it or find interest in it, or you are pretty decent at it. A mediocre skill level at this is going to be a good starting point. The second point to the step 1, there's a lot of hopefully juicy information here, is analyze your current market needs. I kind of already brushed over this, but using Google Trends or Answer the Public, which is one of my favorites, is going to help you understand what that particular market needs and what they're looking for, also what their pain points are, and often it's a good way to find a solution to that too. Now, one simple strategy to self-assessment and your market analysis is just evaluate your current niche and your current content. Decide or go into your analytics, see what is working, what isn't working. There are going to be some things, if you already have a track record, that will be working and others that won't. What are your click-through rates on your YouTube thumbnails? Great, those are some ideas to take away from how to improve your thumbnails. But ultimately, what you're more looking forward to is what content is increasing in watch time. Like, how long is your average view duration on a YouTube video? Obviously, if it's higher, that content is something that resonates with people. So that's something that you can use for future videos, or kind of go along those routes for future videos. Now, the second point to redefining your niche is going to be audience deep dive. So understanding your audience on a deeper level than just surface level stuff. So whether it's creating viewer or customer personas or analyzing your competitors, these are two really good ways to use, or two really good techniques to use in order to understand your audience. Because once you understand your audience, you can start to really understand a bit more about what their pain points are going to be, like what's something they really struggle with, and how you can provide a solution to that. What are your competitors doing? What kind of solutions are they providing to the audience that you want to market to or provide content for? Number 3 is going to be pretty easy, although it does have a couple steps to it. So content and product refinement. Ultimately, if you already have a product, this is going to be a lot easier because you can ultimately just refine it, add more content to it, or take out some fluff. Often that is, you just align your offers with your audience needs even better than it was initially. So often this can be, taking into account reviews from your customers, or maybe over time you've started to develop more knowledge in that area. You can add content to whatever product that is. Often, at least for content creators online, it could be a course, a digital download. It could even be private consulting or coaching or whatever that may be. There's a lot of great options for that. Now, part of this does involve experimentation and A/B testing, like we do with YouTube on thumbnails. But experimenting and iterating ideas for your content or your product is going to be extremely beneficial. So, for example, if you have a video you post on YouTube today and you want to change something tomorrow, maybe change the editing pace or a little bit of the editing style. Change one thing per video each time. And if that resonates with audiences, keep that, because obviously that worked, and change something else. Further down the road, you're going to have a refined format, and you're going to have essentially a hybrid of iterations and experimentations that you've put together to ultimately build a winning piece of content or product. Continuous learning adaptation, it's pretty self-explanatory. Just continue to change and update your content because you're not going to get it right the first time. So it's going to take changes throughout your content journey or your product refinement journey. So continue to research in that industry, learn more about that topic. There's going to be a whole bunch of new information that you can learn for it and add to whatever content or product that you have. Step number 4 is probably one of the most important things: positioning and branding. People want to know that, first of all, you're professional. So having a particular brand, whether it's your face or maybe you have a bit more of a corporate brand, but people recently have kind of pushed back a bit more on buying stuff from corporate entities. So having a personal brand obviously is going to be more beneficial here, but branding in general is extremely important. It shows professionalism and it shows that you're dedicated to the work that you're doing. Positioning is also going to be extremely important because if you don't get it in front of the right people, they're not going to buy. Whether it's putting a YouTube in front of them, when I say not going to buy, they're not going to watch a YouTube video if you don't get it in front of the right people, and a product they're not going to buy if you don't get it in front of the right people. Ultimately, developing a unique selling proposition, it can be pretty straightforward. Just clearly define what sets you apart from your competition. Often that can be like without blatantly saying it, like I am different from my competitors because blah, blah, blah. Rather than telling them that, just show them, give them a reason why they should buy or watch your product. Just make sure it's unique. Provide a unique selling point. Ultimately, a lot of online courses, let's say how to edit in Premiere Pro. There's so many editing courses out there these days that it's hard to stand out. So how do you define yourself from the rest of the competition? And that's also part of why you got to choose the right choose the right industry. Choosing a saturated industry or niche is not very easy at all. So, that's something to consider when positioning your brand. Is if you're not positioning in front of the right people, or if you're not getting enough engagement, but you know that there's a huge demand for it, there's probably also a lot of supply, unless it's something relatively new. and you're willing to spearhead that niche or that idea, then it's going to be pretty hard to position yourself correctly in a saturated niche. Like I mentioned, personal branding is extremely important. So making sure that you use your face or your name. It could be an alias or even a fake name. Just obviously be genuine about it. And if you're going to use a fake name, just don't. I always struggle with this one. And if it gets out that you're using a fake name, people might not feel like you're as genuine. So I would be careful about that. If you do want to use like a quote unquote fake name, I would recommend at least using part of your name as the real name so that people don't feel as misled. That's something that you've just got to be careful of. A content strategy overhaul. Now, this is extremely important. If you feel like your content isn't working, change everything about it. So, for example, if your past 10 videos haven't been performing or they're just not getting the traction that you're hoping for or any traction at all, change pretty much the entire video, how you script it, how you edit it, how you approach the strategy to it. And that could also be a part of redefining your niche and figuring out, maybe I'm sending this to the or making this content for the wrong audience. So a content overhaul strategy, whether it's your product or video content, is going to be extremely beneficial. Step number 5, and the last one, is going to be monitoring and scaling. This is pretty straightforward. It's mostly going to be for the people who are starting to get results and they want to start scaling up. They want to get bigger, faster results, and ultimately to get more successful faster. So tracking your performance is going to be extremely important. Understanding what is working and what isn't. Obviously, keep the things that are working, change the things that aren't working, whether it's one new thing in each video, change the way or change the audio quality that you're recording at, which by the way is extremely important. So that should be the very, very first thing that you pay attention to with your content is your audio quality. The rest can come later. And maybe it's the editing might be a bit too obnoxious, or the scripting might be cheesy, or there's too many jokes that it just flies over people's head. Change whatever it is in that video for the next video. So if you have too many jokes flying around or there's too much sarcasm, take it out for the next video and see how that performs, because your industry or niche might react differently to different types of changes. So it's not always a blanketed statement. You've got to understand your niche. Seeking feedback for your content and making adjustments is obviously very important, but can be time consuming. Asking the community for suggestions or feedback on your content can be a little tedious, and it's an extremely manual process. But often a great way to do this without spending too much time is just go to your YouTube comments and see what they're saying. If they don't like your microphone quality or your video quality, make a change. That's one of the most direct and easiest ways to make changes to your content that you know isn't working for your audience. And then ultimately after that, it's just expand your reach, whether it's, obviously getting a bit ahead of myself, but hiring people onto your job or your company, and solidifying your niche in that content and just creating more content around it. Maybe you expand on social media like Twitter and TikTok. You'd be surprised, you can get a lot more clients on Twitter and TikTok. Twitter is like just the business hub of the world. I don't know how much more LinkedIn is. I don't really use LinkedIn. I don't know. But I mean, yeah, that's probably the 5 biggest strategies when it comes to redefining your niche. And at least for me, that is how I've been able to pivot my content on YouTube. So when I made a change, I've done 2 major changes. One was from just fun shorts to VFX tutorials. That wasn't a very good transition, and I just completely switched on the dime, and my audience was like, wait, what is going on? Why are you doing this? And my YouTube channel suffered for that. When I changed from editing to live streaming content and like how to stream educational content, as opposed to editing educational content, I made the switch a bit slower, and you can definitely see the difference, and you can tell that some of your audience doesn't quite enjoy that. One neat trick in the YouTube analytics is you can choose not to send notifications to your existing subscribers, and you can essentially exclude those types of subscribers, and it'll have a shorter initial growth or slower growth. But once YouTube understands a bit more what that content is, they'll get it in front of the right people, and it's going to start growing, and YouTube's going to see the right signals from your audience, or your new audience, I should say, instead of seeing your existing audience clicking out or essentially hurting the statistics of your YouTube channel. That's a little bit more of a nuanced technique to avoid having your existing audience send the wrong signals to YouTube when you're changing niches or industries. So a little bit of a trick over there. But hopefully this video was helpful. And I'd love to see the rest of you guys apply any tips and tricks to this. If you guys have any suggestions, leave it in the comments below. We'd love to start this discussion. And yeah, it's going to just be a lot of kind of face-to-face chatting with each other, bouncing ideas off, hey, is my thumbnail good? Like, give me some suggestions or videos. We'll go over pacing, we'll go over editing techniques, all that kind of stuff. So hope you guys enjoyed.